Richard Lee Tabler spent 17 years on death row in Texas after being convicted of murdering 4 people in 2004, including 2 teenage girls. On February 13, 2025, just 8 days after turning 46, he was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit. That night, he was not granted a special last meal, but what he said before dying surprised many. To understand how he got to that point, we must go back to his childhood and to a week before Thanksgiving Day. This documentary contains factual descriptions that may be sensitive to some viewers. It is presented with care, respect, and the intention to inform. Richard Lee Tabler was born on February 5, 1979, in Tulare County, California, into a family marked by conflict and instability. Even before his birth, his arrival was rejected by his father, Robert Tabler, who tried to convince his wife Lorraine to terminate the pregnancy. This early tension marked the beginning of a fractured childhood. During his early years, Richard witnessed a dysfunctional marriage. His father, an alcoholic frequently absent due to work obligations, was also involved in extramarital affairs. His mother was barely present due to long work hours. Maternal care was practically non-existent. She left him in the care of his older siblings, and when Richard was just 10, she left the household for good. Tabler's life was marked by constant relocation, moving between Florida, Nevada, and primarily California, depending on which parent he was living with at the time. In school, he struggled to adapt. He repeated 3rd grade, had difficulty concentrating, and lacked an environment that nurtured emotional and academic development. At age 12, he was diagnosed with ADHD, a condition that further complicated his ability to function. Though his mother and sister described him as having a good heart, they also noted his volatile temper. The lack of emotional structure and early abandonment deeply shaped his behavior. In adulthood, his troubles escalated. He was convicted of 2nd-degree burglary, assaulted a police officer, escaped from custody while handcuffed, and issued serious threats to his parole officer, telling him he would take care of him and his family. On a personal level, he had a relationship with a woman who had a daughter from a previous relationship. That relationship also ended shortly before his arrest. First double murder, November 26, 2004. A conflict with Mohammed Amin Ramouni, Tabler's former boss at the nightclub Teasers, escalated rapidly in late 2004. Tabler claimed Ramouni had threatened his family, igniting a desire for revenge. By November 18th, just 1 week before the killings, he had already made up his mind. In the following days, he prepared meticulously. He acquired a 9mm pistol, a pickup truck, and a camcorder. It was a deliberate, calculated, and cold-blooded act. On Thanksgiving Day, while families were gathering for dinner, Tabler called Ramouni, offering to sell him stereo equipment at a low price. Ramouni agreed, unaware that it was a trap. He arrived with his friend Hytham Frank Zayed. Tabler and his 18-year-old accomplice Timothy Payne were already waiting in a dark parking lot. As soon as the vehicle arrived, Tabler shot Zayed and then Ramouni. He pulled both men out of the car and, seeing that Ramouni was still alive, shot him again. Payne filmed parts of the attack with the camcorder. After the murders, Tabler looted the car, taking a wallet and a black bag. That same night, he called the sheriff's office to confess, but he made it clear he wasn't done yet. Second double murder, November 28, 2004. Tabler had a list of 11 people linked to Teasers nightclub that, according to him, had to die. Among the names were 2 teenage dancers, 16-year-old Amanda Benefield and 18-year-old Tiffany Lorraine Dotson. Tabler believed they had tipped off police about the first killings. On November 28th, he lured them in with the promise of drugs. He drove them to a remote lake. There he murdered them using the same weapon from the previous attack. Once again, he called the sheriff not to confess but to boast about the killings and threaten more violence if the club wasn't shut down. Amanda and Tiffany's bodies were discovered by an employee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Tiffany was identified quickly. Amanda, being a missing minor from Louisiana, took several more days to identify. Her identity was confirmed on December 4th. That same November 28th, Tabler was arrested on unrelated theft charges. However, investigators already suspected his involvement in the killings. During questioning, Tabler confessed to all 4 murders and named Timothy Payne as his accomplice in the Thanksgiving night crimes. Payne was arrested shortly thereafter. On November 30th, both were formally charged with the murders of Ramouni and Zayed. On December 10th, Tabler was additionally charged with the murders of Amanda and Tiffany. Despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty in court. The trial began in March 2007. On March 21st, Tabler was found guilty of the November 26th murders. On April 2nd, he was sentenced to death for both counts. Oddly, though the charges for Amanda and Tiffany's murders remained open, he was never tried for them. As for Payne, he was tried in November 2007, found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole until 2044. The prosecution chose not to seek the death penalty in his case. Tabler was transferred to the Polunsky unit, where he spent 17 years on death row. In October 2008, he attempted suicide and was temporarily moved to the Jester 4 unit. That same month, he became involved in one of the most notorious incidents of his incarceration, using a smuggled cell phone to threaten Texas State Senator John Whitmire, claiming to know personal details about his family. Investigations revealed that the device had been shared by 10 inmates. The discovery triggered a statewide prison lockdown. His mother, Lorraine, was arrested after it was determined she had brought the phone and purchased airtime. In 2009, Tabler received an additional 10-year sentence for the incident. Between 2008 and 2012, he also sent multiple threatening letters to Senator Whitmire. On one occasion, he convinced a Methodist prison chaplain to smuggle letters out of the facility. He even issued threats through a personal blog. Despite his past, Tabler claimed to have found faith in his later years. He spent his time drawing, writing books, and guiding other inmates in spiritual matters. According to witnesses, he also cared for fellow prisoners. One widely known story involved a small lizard named Little Blue that he found in his cell and raised with care. He taught it to climb on him, fed it cockroaches, and let it rest on his head. The name Little Blue wasn't random, it was also Tabler's own prison nickname, and naming the reptile after himself became a symbolic emotional bond. Amid his long incarceration, Tabler also formed a significant personal relationship. He married a woman he met through a prison pen pal program. What began as letter exchanges turned into a deep emotional connection. She publicly supported him in his final years, insisting that Richard was no longer the man who had committed those crimes. In her words, she had never met anyone with a heart as big even outside prison. In December 2024, a death warrant was signed. Tabler was one of 4 inmates scheduled for execution in Texas during the first quarter of 2025. In his final days, Tabler chose not to file any more appeals. However, his attorneys convinced him to submit a clemency petition to Governor Greg Abbott. The request highlighted his spiritual transformation, genuine remorse, and positive influence within the prison. They argued that if his sentence were commuted to life imprisonment, he could continue contributing to the rehabilitation of others. On February 13, 2025, at 6:38 p.m., Richard Lee Tabler was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit. He was the 5th person executed in the United States that year. Coincidentally, on the same day, another death row inmate, James Dennis Ford, was executed in the state of Florida just 1 hour earlier. Although the 2 cases were unrelated, the timing attracted attention from media and activists alike. Tabler was not granted a special last meal and ate the same food as other inmates that day. In his final statement, he addressed the victims' families with the following words: "There is not a day that goes by that I don't regret my actions. I had no right to take your loved ones from you, and I ask and hope and pray that one day you find it in your hearts to forgive me for those actions. No amount of my apologies will ever return them to you." He thanked his family, legal team, and the prison staff. He said he hoped to begin a new life in heaven. Addressing the warden, he said, "I am finished." As the lethal drugs began to flow through his veins, he softly whispered, "I'm sorry." He breathed rapidly a few more times, then his body went still. He was pronounced dead at 6:38 p.m. This case is filed, but your comment could reveal new evidence, and with a like and a subscription, you'll help uncover new cases. For now, this story is filed. Choose the next case file and continue the investigation.